Hey, fellow adventurers! Tonight we journey to the frozen roof of Tamriel, to a land of 9 holds and 10,000 regrets, where every new Dragonborn stumbles out of a burning village in Helgen absolutely convinced they know what they're doing. They do not. Picture it now. The snow crunching underfoot, the aurora smeared green and violet across a sky that doesn't care about you, a cart ride you barely survived, and a whole province of mistakes waiting patiently for you to make them. Let's be honest, you probably wouldn't last a single night in the Rift Wilderness without accidentally attacking a chicken and getting the entire town of Riverwood to declare a blood feud against you. We've all been there. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, drop your location and your local time in the comments. It's oddly comforting to know someone's listening from a rainy Tuesday in Manchester while someone else drifts off under a warm Manila midnight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The very first sin, the one committed before the Dragonborn has even wiped the Helgen soot off their boots, is the sin of the scattered soul, the impulse to poke a curious finger into every single one of Skyrim's 18 skills at once. It feels so natural. There stands the fresh hero, blinking in the daylight, one hand twitching toward a sword, the other conjuring a wobbly little flame, a bow slung hopefully across the back, and a half-formed dream of also somehow becoming a master enchanter and a silver-tongued merchant and a lock-picking cat burglar all in the same breath. And Skyrim, bless its quietly indifferent heart, will let you. It will smile and nod and hand you a perk point every time your overall level ticks up, and that overall level rises whenever any of those 18 skills climbs even a little. This is the core truth the game never sits you down to explain. Your character level is nothing but the sum of your growing skills, a bucket slowly filling from 18 separate taps. Open all the taps a trickle, and the bucket fills, sure, but you end up a jack of all trades and a master of precisely none, spread thinner than the mead at a Riften funeral. The traps spring shut around level 10. That's when the Dragonborn glances down at their perk trees, those gorgeous, glittering constellations, each skill mapped onto a cluster of stars, and realizes they have been sprinkling precious perks into conjuration and light armor and speech like confetti at a wedding they didn't even want to attend. Meanwhile, the sword they actually swing every fight sits neglected, its one-handed tree dark and empty, not a single star lit. Here is the number that ought to be tattooed on the inside of every new player's eyelids. There are 251 perks in the base game, and for years the game's soft ceiling around level 81 meant you could only ever grab about 80 of them in a single life. 80 out of 251. Do the grim arithmetic, and you'll see that a first playthrough is not a buffet. It is a series of quiet, permanent little funerals for all the builds you'll never become. Now, there is a mercy hidden in the mechanics, though most first-timers stumble into it far too late to matter. Back in 2013, patch 1.9 gave us legendary skills, and it works like this. Take any skill all the way to 100, mark it legendary, and the game resets that skill down to level 15, while gently refunding every perk point you ever poured into it, handing them back for you to spend wherever you like. It's the closest thing Skyrim has to a proper respec, a second chance whispered to you at the end of a very long road. But, and the Dragonborn always learns this the hard way, you cannot cheat the geometry of the trees. You can't loop around to grab a low-tier perk without first buying all the prerequisites climbing up to it. The smithing tree is the classic teacher here. Light armor perks curl up one side, heavy armor perks up the other, and they meet at dragon armor at the very top. So no, you don't get to snatch both the glass and Daedric perks without slogging through everything beneath them first. Legendary skills give you infinite road, but the road still only goes one way. Here's the tidbit most players never discover, the one buried so deep it might as well be under Blackreach. Legendary skills are not the only reset in the game. If you own the Dragonborn add-on and you brave the writhing, papery horror of Apocrypha, there's a black book called Waking Dreams, the same cursed tome tied to the quest At the Summit of Apocrypha, that offers a far cleaner mercy. Read it after finishing that quest, and it can wipe your perks entirely, refunding the lot in one elegant gesture from the tentacled god Hermaeus Mora himself. No grinding a skill back to 100. No crawling up the tree twice, just to deal with the Daedric Prince of Forbidden Knowledge, who is, admittedly, exactly the sort of entity you'd expect to offer a free respec, with absolutely no terrible strings attached. Spoiler, there are always strings. There's a reason Mora's realm smells faintly of everyone who's ever trusted him. And this is where the community, as it always does, splits into gently squabbling camps around a warm fire of disagreement. Ask any longtime player whether legendarying a combat skill is worth it, and you'll start a debate older than some of the players having it. One camp swears by it. Reset your combat trees, they say. Keep leveling forever. Drink in that endless progression until you've collected all 251 perks and become a walking god who has seen everything Skyrim can throw. The other camp recoils in horror because the moment you make one-handed legendary, your carefully maxed sword skill collapses back to novice, and suddenly you're getting embarrassed by a draugr you'd have sneezed to dust an hour ago. There's an even quieter, more philosophical faction that insists the whole legendary treadmill misses the point entirely, that a first playthrough is meant to be lived with regret, that the builds you didn't take are supposed to haunt you, and that the true Skyrim experience is not omnipotence, but the bittersweet ache of having chosen. They're a little insufferable, that faction. They're also, annoyingly, half right. So the lesson the Dragonborn eventually absorbs, usually somewhere around their third character, is to choose a spine early and feed it. Pick the 2 or 3 skills that define who you actually are. The blade you'll live behind, the armor you'll die in, maybe the one flourish that makes you feel clever. And pour your perks there like a farmer watering the crops that'll actually survive the winter. Everything else can wait. Everything else can be a second life, or a legendary reset, or a bargain struck with a slithering god in a library that shouldn't exist. But scatter yourself across all 18 skills on your first frightened stumble out of Helgen, and you'll arrive at the great dragon battles of the main quest as a beautifully mediocre generalist, wondering why every fight feels like wading through cold porridge. The bucket was always filling. You just forgot to decide what it was filling with. And speaking of decisions the Dragonborn makes without reading the label, while they're still fumbling their perks and mourning the builds they'll never have, they walk right past a gift the game is practically shoving into their hands. Because on that very first escorted stroll out of Helgen, whether it's the gruff rebel Ralof or the earnest legionnaire Hadvar leading the way down toward Riverwood, the path curves past 3 tall, glowing slabs of ancient stone set into the hillside southwest of the village, overlooking the cold blue mirror of Lake Ilanalta. The Guardian Stones, 3 of them, humming with soft light, each carved with a constellation, a warrior, a mage, a thief, and each one is the closest thing this brutal, frozen province offers to a warm handshake. Touch one and it activates. No cost, no catch. And suddenly, the skills you actually care about level 20% faster for the entire game. And what does the average first-timer do? They squint at the pretty glowing rocks, mutter, "Huh, neat," and keep walking toward Riverwood to go sell a bunch of iron daggers. Tragic. Genuinely tragic. Here's the core truth the game trusts you to figure out on your own. Those 3 Guardian Stones sort all 18 skills into 3 great families. The Warrior Stone speeds your combat skills: one-handed, two-handed, block, heavy armor, smithing. The Mage Stone quickens the arcane arts: destruction, conjuration, restoration, alteration, illusion, and enchanting. The Thief Stone hurries the sneakier trades: sneak, lockpicking, pickpocket, speech, alchemy, light armor, and yes, oddly, archery, which the game files under stealth, despite it being about as subtle as an arrow to the face. That's the mistake that compounds so beautifully with last section's sin of the scattered soul. Not only do first-timers spread their perks too thin, they refuse the free experience boost that would at least help their neglected skills catch up. Pick the Warrior Stone if you're living behind a blade. Pick the Mage Stone if you're slinging fire. And it costs you nothing, because, and this is the part that makes the walk past so painful, you can swap between them anytime you like, freely, with no cooldown, no penalty, no angry god demanding tribute. There is quite literally no reason to have no stone active. Walking around Skyrim without a standing stone is like refusing free dessert because you're worried it might be too generous. Only one can be active at a time, mind you. Touch a new stone and the old one's blessing quietly winks out. 13 of these things are scattered across the province, and they're a jealous bunch, permitting you exactly one blessing to your name. So the savvy Dragonborn learns to treat them like a wardrobe rather than a wedding ring. The Warrior Stone while grinding your smithing at the forge, then perhaps the Lord Stone before wading into a hard dungeon, then the Lover Stone when you want a gentle 15% boost spread across everything at once. That Lover Stone, tucked away on a windswept cliff northeast of Markarth, just above Kolskegger Mine, is the Connoisseur's Pick. It lifts all skills by 15% instead of 20% to a single family, which makes it the darling of anyone building a hybrid spell sword or a jack of many trades who refuses to specialize. It has one sulky quirk, though. It won't share the bed with your rested bonus. Sleep in a proper bed under most stones and you get a cozy, well-rested experience boost. But the Lover Stone stubbornly overrides it, because apparently a stone shaped like a lover gets possessive about who else you've been sleeping with. Now for the tidbit buried a little deeper in the lore than most players ever dig. These aren't just gameplay gimmicks bolted on for convenience. The Standing Stones are the direct spiritual descendants of the birth signs from the older Elder Scrolls games, the ones veterans of Morrowind and Oblivion will remember choosing at character creation. In the cosmology of this world, the night sky is dominated by 13 great constellations, and 3 of them, the Warrior, the Mage, and the Thief, are called the Guardian constellations, watching over the other 10 like elder siblings. That's why these 3 particular stones are grouped together on that hillside and named the Guardian Stones. They're an echo of the heavens themselves pressed into rock, a little piece of Aetherius, the magical realm beyond the stars, leaking its influence down into the mortal world. Touch one, and you're not just flipping a gameplay switch. You're aligning your fate with a constellation, choosing which star will watch over your journey. There's an even smaller detail most players miss entirely. If you activate a stone while Ralof or Hadvar is still standing there beside you during that opening escort, they'll actually stop and comment on your choice. A tiny scripted breath of acknowledgement that almost nobody hears because they've already sprinted ahead to loot the nearest bandit. And of course, wherever there are two good options in Skyrim, there is a fan argument that has been quietly smoldering for well over a decade, and the Standing Stones have one of the oldest and gentlest of these ongoing feuds. Loverstone versus Guardian Stone. Pick a side, adventurers, and prepare to defend it on forums until the sun burns out. One camp insists the Guardian Stones are simply the better mathematical deal for any focused build. 20% beats 15, full stop. And if you're a pure mage leveling nothing but destruction, conjuration, and restoration, the Mage Stone is pouring an extra 5% onto every skill you actually touch. The other camp counters that real playthroughs are messy, that even a pure mage ends up leveling Enchanting and Alchemy and Speech, which sprawl across two different Guardian families. And once your skills spill across categories, the Loverstone's flat 15% on everything quietly wins the long game. There's a third, sneakier faction that's technically correct and therefore the most annoying, which points out that with the Ethereal Crown from the Dawnguard expansion, you can carry 2 stone blessings at once, Lover plus Mage, say, and stack them into a leveling engine that makes the whole debate wonderfully moot, provided you're willing to do a bit of headwear micromanagement that borders on a part-time job. But the deeper point, the one that ties the ribbon on this whole mistake, is that the first-time Dragonborn doesn't lose because they picked the wrong stone. They lose because they picked no stone at all. They walked past a free, permanent, endlessly swappable blessing on their very first morning in Skyrim and never came back, then spent 40 hours wondering why their skills crawled upward like frostbitten snails, while some friend who touched the Warrior Stone on day 1 was already forging Daedric armor. The stones don't ask for much. No quest, no sacrifice, no bargain whispered in a dead language. They just sit there on the hillside above Lake Ilinalta, patient and glowing, exactly where you left them, waiting for you to remember that in a game this stingy with mercy, you don't get to leave the free ones lying in the snow. Choose a constellation. Let it watch over you. And for the love of Talos, when you find that stubborn lover stone on the cliffs of the Reach, at least stop long enough to say hello before you decide whether it's clingy. Which brings us, rather neatly, to the frozen ridge northwest of Solitude, where one more of those glowing stones waits, the Steed Stone, because the Dragonborn is about to need it more than they know. See, having learned to specialize their perks and finally touched a Guardian Stone, our hero now commits the third great blunder of every first playthrough, and it is perhaps the most universally human of them all. They pick up everything. Every rusty iron dagger, every cracked wooden bowl, every single wheel of cheese in every single farmhouse from Riverwood to Windhelm. They loot the dead, they loot the living, they loot the cabinets and the barrels and the sad little urns, until the Dragonborn is no longer an adventurer, but a shambling, clanking horde of other people's cutlery, waddling across the tundra at the majestic pace of a wounded snail. The core fact here is a number every player memorizes through pain. Your base carry weight is exactly 300, and it doesn't matter whether you're a burly Nord or a wispy little Breton. Everyone starts the game hauling the same 300 pounds of potential regret. Cross that threshold, and the game flashes its favorite passive-aggressive message. You are overencumbered and cannot run. And oh, the indignities that follow. You can't sprint, you can't fast travel, you can't hop a carriage to the next city. You are simply stuck, trudging in real time across an enormous province, while your loot, most of it worth roughly 4 gold, drags behind you like a guilty conscience. The only way to raise that ceiling honestly is to pour points into stamina when you level, 5 precious carry weight points at a time, which forces a quietly brilliant little choice. Do you want to hit harder and last longer in a fight, or do you want to carry one more suit of bandit armor to sell for pocket change? Skyrim never asks the question out loud, it just lets you feel the answer in your aching virtual back. Now, the Steed Stone up on that Solitude Ridge is the first real mercy. 100 extra pounds of capacity, and more deliciously, it makes every piece of armor you're wearing weigh absolutely nothing, which for a heavily armored Nord is like removing an entire second person from your inventory. Pair it with the Extra Pockets perk deep in the pickpocket tree, another flat 100 pounds once you've hit level 50 in the Art of Light Fingers, and suddenly you're a proper mule instead of a pathetic one. But here's where first-timers get it catastrophically wrong. They assume the horse they just bought for 1,000 gold is gonna carry their loot. It is not. In base Skyrim, that noble steed is a glorified taxi with no saddlebags whatsoever. It can't hold a single sweet roll for you. What it can do, and this is the part worth knowing, is let you fast travel, even while hopelessly overencumbered, because the game apparently decides that a horse doesn't care how much junk its rider has stuffed into their pockets. So the horse isn't a pack animal. It's a getaway car for the guilty hoarder. And honestly, that's the more Skyrim solution anyway. The real trick, the one that separates the seasoned adventurer from the waddling amateur, is the follower. Every companion you recruit has their own carry limit, roughly 300 pounds, just like you started with. And the lazy method is to shove loot into their inventory through the trade menu until they too are overburdened. But the buried, beautiful exploit, the tidbit that most players never stumble across, works like this. Dump all your excess loot into a nearby chest or barrel. Then use the dialogue command, "I need you to do something." Point your follower at the container and tell them to take everything. When a follower loots a container on your orders, the game politely forgets to enforce their carry limit at all. Lydia will happily become a bottomless void of stolen tankards and dragon bones, staggering along behind you with 1,000 pounds of loot and not a word of complaint, because she is, as she never tires of reminding you, sworn to carry your burdens. She said it. She volunteered. Let her live her truth. And if you want the truly unhinged option, there's the beast blood. But we'll get to the werewolves in a few nights. Suffice to say for now that transforming into a werewolf temporarily grants you something like 1,900 pounds of carry weight in beast form, which means a first-time player having a total inventory meltdown in the middle of a dungeon can, in theory, sprout claws, absorb their own hoard into their monstrous frame, and lope back to town as a 9-foot ball of fur and fensible goods. It's not elegant. Nothing about hoarding in Skyrim is elegant, but it works, and there's a certain grim poetry to solving a shopping problem by becoming a monster. Here's where the community lights its familiar campfire and starts arguing, because carry weight is one of those systems that splits players cleanly down the middle. One camp, call them the Immersionists, insists the 300-pound limit is sacred, a vital piece of friction that forces you to make choices, to actually decide what's worth carrying out of a barrow, instead of vacuuming up every candlestick like a raccoon with a mortgage. They'll tell you that removing encumbrance turns Skyrim from a survival adventure into a spreadsheet with dragons. The other camp, the Convenience faction, points out, not unreasonably, that nobody's immersion was ever deepened by standing in a dungeon for 10 real-world minutes doing inventory Tetris, dropping and re-grabbing iron ingots to shave off half a pound. They mod the limit away entirely, or console it to a comfortable 10,000, and they sleep like babies. Both sides have been at this since 2011, and neither is wrong, which is, of course, the most infuriating kind of argument. But the deeper lesson underneath the whole squabble is one the first-time Dragonborn only learns after their fourth agonizing walk of shame across the tundra. Value is not the same as weight. That ancient Nordic greatsword, weighing 16 pounds and selling for 80 gold, is a terrible deal. That handful of soul gems and jewelry and skill books, weighing almost nothing and worth a small fortune, is what you actually came for. The seasoned player develops a ruthless little ratio in their head, gold per pound, and abandons anything that doesn't clear the bar, leaving heaps of worthless loot glittering on dungeon floors, like the shed skin of who they used to be. Because the game will never stop you from picking up that 1,000th wheel of cheese. It will simply let you carry it, slowly, painfully, all the way to nowhere, until you finally understand that in Skyrim, as in life, the trick isn't grabbing everything you can reach, it's learning what you're willing to leave behind, and, ideally, making poor Lydia carry the rest. Now, among all the loot our overburdened hero has been frantically stuffing into Lydia's bottomless pockets, there is one category they've been treating with catastrophic carelessness. The little bundles of flowers and fungus and bug parts and animal glands that the game quietly calls ingredients. And what does the average first-timer do the moment they reach a general store? They dump the whole fragrant pile onto the counter and sell it for a handful of septims, never once suspecting that they've just handed a merchant the raw materials for what is, without exaggeration, one of the most gloriously broken systems in the entire game. Those blue mountain flowers and glowing mushrooms and severed bear claws weren't junk. They were the beginning of an empire, and you sold them for 3 gold to buy a slightly nicer belt. Here's the core mechanic the game never bothers to teach. Every single ingredient in Skyrim, from the humble deathbell blossom to the severed slaughterfish egg, carries exactly 4 alchemical effects locked inside it, hidden behind the word unknown until you coax them out. And there are 2 ways to coax. The first, the one most players discover by accident, is simply to eat the thing. Select a raw ingredient in your menu, chomp it down, and the game reveals its very first effect, always the top left one, in a fixed order, while also applying that effect to you, which is how countless new Dragonborn have accidentally poisoned themselves nibbling a nightshade to see what it does. The second, cleverer path is to march to an alchemy lab and start combining. Mix 2 ingredients that happen to share a hidden effect, and the moment your potion succeeds, that shared effect is revealed permanently on both ingredients, no eating required. This is the actual point of all that hoarding. You weren't collecting garnish, you were collecting a puzzle box, and every barrow you looted was quietly handing you more pieces.
The genius reveal, the trick that turns a curious dabbler into a proper alchemist, lives deep in the alchemy perk tree in a perk called Experimenter. Take its first rank at level 50, and suddenly eating an ingredient no longer reveals one measly effect. It reveals the first 2 at once. Rank 2 at level 70 gives you 3. Rank 3 at level 90 gives you all 4 in a single bite, which means a master alchemist can pop one unfamiliar mushroom into their mouth and instantly know everything it's capable of. Pair that with the combining method and you've got a discovery engine. One successful 2-ingredient potion can peel back multiple hidden effects across both components at the same time. Suddenly, the walls of your alchemy menu light up with revealed properties, and you can sort your entire ingredient collection by effect, hunting for the exact combination you need. Restore health, fortify one-handed, resist fire. Or, and this is where the game starts to sweat, fortify enchanting and fortify smithing, the two ingredients that begin the notorious crafting spiral, we'll dig into a few sections from now. Just know for tonight that the little flowers you were selling are the first thread of that particular tapestry. Here's the obscure tidbit, and it's a dark one, because of course it is. Nearly every ingredient in Skyrim is completely safe to nibble. The worst you'll usually do is briefly damage your own stamina or blur your vision. There is exactly one exception, one single ingredient in the whole province that will genuinely kill you if you eat it: Jaren root. You can't find it growing on any hillside or tucked in any dungeon chest either. The only place it exists is in the hands of the Dark Brotherhood, pressed upon you during the assassination of the Emperor himself, a poison so potent it's meant to end an empire's ruler with a single tainted plate of food. And somewhere out there, on some first playthrough, a curious little Dragonborn who got into the habit of eating everything they picked up popped that root into their mouth just to see what it did, and discovered, in the last 2 seconds of their character's life, exactly what it did. So consider this your gentle bedtime warning: taste freely, taste often, but never ever snack on the murder root. Which brings us to the campfire, where the alchemists gather to argue, as they always do, about the one thing new players agonize over most. Should you discover effects the honest way, or just look them up? One camp, the purists, the discoverers, the people who genuinely enjoy a puzzle, insist that the whole soul of alchemy is the mystery. Wandering the tundra, gathering strange components, munching them one by one, slowly assembling a mental map of what pairs with what, and feeling the private thrill of stumbling onto a combination nobody handed you. To them, pulling up an ingredient chart online is like doing a crossword with the answer key open on your lap. Technically, it fills the boxes, but why did you even show up? The other camp rolls their eyes so hard you can hear it, pointing out that Skyrim has well over 100 ingredients, with 4 effects each, that discovering them all blind means eating your way through the entire flora and fauna of the province while occasionally poisoning yourself, and that there is no medal, no achievement, no whispered thanks from the divines for having done it the tedious way. Both camps have been at this since launch, and the honest answer is that it depends entirely on whether you're the kind of person who reads the last page of a mystery novel first. No judgment, a little judgment. But underneath the argument sits the real lesson for the first-time Dragonborn, and it connects straight back to that ruthless gold per pound ratio we talked about last time. Ingredients are the perfect loot. They weigh almost nothing, most of them 1/10 of a pound or less, and yet a stack of them, once you know how to combine them, can be brewed into potions worth hundreds of septims each. The player who sells raw deathbell to a merchant is trading a single copper coin for something that, with a little alchemy skill, becomes a poison of lingering damage worth a small fortune. Alchemy is quite possibly the fastest legitimate money in the entire game, a printing press disguised as a hobby, and it fits neatly into the packs of even the most weight-conscious mage, precisely because flowers are light and coins are heavy. So the next time our hero stands at a general store counter, ingredient pouch in hand, ready to sell the lot for pocket change, the wiser move is to keep the flowers and sell the merchant something else entirely, like, say, the results. Let them buy your potions. That's the whole trick. Don't sell the seeds when you could be selling the harvest. Just, for the last time, make absolutely certain that harvest doesn't include the murder root.
That separate you from everyone else in Skyrim, let's talk about the moment the game reveals what you actually are, and the way first-time players nearly fumble it. Because somewhere around the outskirts of Whiterun, after a jittery guard comes sprinting up the road babbling about a dragon at the Western Watchtower, the Dragonborn is marched out to a crumbling stone tower to meet their destiny. And there it comes, a genuine dragon, Mirmulnir by name, wheeling out of the clouds with a roar that rattles your ribs, torching the guards, snatching men off the parapets, and generally behaving like the apex predator the game has spent 5 hours promising you. And the first-time player's instinct? Run, sprint, hide behind the tower and fire arrows from behind a rock while quietly making peace with their gods, which is understandable. It's also, in the grand scheme, exactly backwards, because that terrifying flying murder lizard is not an obstacle to your adventure. It's the entire point of it. Here's the core truth the game finally unveils in that battle. When Mirmulnir crashes to the earth and dies, something extraordinary happens. His body bursts into swirling light, and that light, golden, keening, alive, pours into you, and the world seems to hold its breath. You've absorbed his soul, and in that instant, every guard on that shattered tower stares at you like you've grown a second head, muttering, "Dragonborn," under their breath, because what you just did is something no ordinary mortal can do. Anyone in Skyrim can, in theory, kill a dragon with enough arrows and enough luck. Only the Dragonborn can devour its soul. And that soul isn't just a trophy, it's currency, and it's knowledge. Absorbing a dragon lets you take effortlessly the deep understanding of the Thu'um that dragons spend their entire immortal lives cultivating, which is why you can walk up to a word wall, learn a single scratched syllable of the dragon tongue, and then spend one of those absorbed souls to unlock it and make it yours. Flee every dragon, and you flee the mechanism that makes you special. You'd be a dragonborn who refuses to eat dragons, like a baker with a lifelong fear of flour. The number sits right there in your magic menu, quietly counting. Dragon souls collected, waiting to be spent. And here's the thing that makes fleeing so genuinely foolish. A dragon soul, once you've killed the beast, doesn't spoil. If you drop a dragon, but you're too far away when it dies, its soul simply lingers there beside the smoldering corpse, patient, and you can wander back days later to claim it. But there's a darker clause in that contract, one that ties back to a lord we've already met tonight. Remember Hermaeus Mora, the tentacled prince of forbidden knowledge from that Black Book respec? The one who always offers a deal with terrible strings? He has a champion, a man named Miraak, the very first Dragonborn who ever lived, an ancient traitor who long ago learned to bend dragons to his will and devour their souls, just as you do. And here's the obscure, faintly horrifying tidbit. Once you journey to the ash-choked island of Solstheim and disturb his temple, Miraak begins reaching across the world to steal your kills. You'll strike the final blow on a dragon, watch it collapse, lean in to absorb the soul that's rightfully yours, and instead, a spectral figure will shimmer into being, drink the light down himself, and vanish, leaving you empty-handed and quietly furious. It's not a bug. Bethesda coded that theft on purpose, a constant needling reminder that you are not the only one of your kind, and that another Dragonborn out there considers your souls his by right. Defeat him at the summit of Apocrypha, and he coughs the stolen souls back up, along with a generous heap of his own. But until then, every dragon you fail to reach fast enough might just feed your rival instead. There's a deeper piece of lore lurking under all this too, one that makes the fleeing even sadder. When a dragon dies and its soul is not absorbed, that soul doesn't move on to any afterlife. Dragons are children of the time god Akatosh, and their souls are so potent they can't simply be destroyed or trapped in a soul gem the way a bandit's can. The body just lies there, a lifeless hunk of scale, waiting. And who comes to collect the waiting dead? Alduin. The World Eater himself, the Black Dragon at the heart of the main quest, spends the early game soaring over ancient burial mounds and croaking dragons back to life, resurrecting his fallen kin to rebuild an army. So every dragon you kill and abandon is a dragon Alduin can raise again. But every dragon whose soul you absorb is a dragon that stays dead, permanently, finally dead. Its power now yours instead of being recycled into the enemy's ranks. Running away doesn't just cost you a shout, it hands your foe a soldier. Naturally, the community has spent well over a decade arguing about what absorbing a soul actually means for the dragon on the receiving end, and it's one of the gentler, more philosophical debates in the whole fandom. One camp reads it as mercy. You're releasing a proud, ancient being from the indignity of lying around as reanimated meat, granting it a clean death and carrying its knowledge forward so some part of it lives on in you. Another camp reads it as annihilation, pointing out that dragons genuinely fear you, precisely because you don't just kill their bodies, you erase them from the cycle of death and rebirth entirely. For immortal beings who expect to always come back, permanent death is the ultimate horror, and you're the walking embodiment of it. A third, quieter voice wonders whether the dragon's consciousness simply merges into yours, whether every soul you swallow leaves some faint echo rattling around inside the Dragonborn's head, which would explain rather a lot about why the Dragonborn spends the whole game climbing mountains alone and shouting at the weather. The game never settles it. It just lets you feel the golden light pour in and decide for yourself. And then, because this is Skyrim, there's the pure comedy the fleeing players miss entirely, because the game's dragons obey the same ragdoll physics as everything else, which means a dragon swooping down to land near a giant or a mammoth can get swatted with a club and launched, spinning into the stratosphere, or occasionally clipped into a mountainside and folded into geometry that would make a mathematician weep. The player who runs from every dragon never gets to witness the sublime chaos of a legendary boss battle ending because an angry cow headbutted the World Eater's cousin off a cliff. That, right there, is the reward for standing your ground. So the lesson is simple, and it's the whole thesis of being who you are. Don't flee the wing shadow. Plant your feet, weather the fire, and drink the light. Because the dragons aren't in your way. The dragons are the way. And the only thing worse than facing one is letting someone like Mirak enjoy the soul you were too busy running to claim. And here is the perfect moment to make good on a promise, because a few nights back, while our hero was drowning in loot, I mentioned that a werewolf's monstrous frame can haul nearly 1,900 extra pounds of stolen tankards. And now we arrive at how the Dragonborn earns those claws in the first place, and the small catastrophe most first-timers walk straight into to get them. It happens inside the Companions, that warm brotherhood of warriors headquartered in the upturned longboat of Jorrvaskr in Whiterun. Join them, prove yourself, and eventually you're led down into a hidden chamber beneath the city, called the Underforge, where the huntress Alla stands beside a basin of dark, steaming blood and invites you to drink. And the first-time player, thrilled to be offered a superpower, gulps it down without a single question. Because who reads the terms and conditions when someone offers to make you a wolf? The core mechanic is genuinely thrilling, to be fair. That mouthful of beast blood infects you with lycanthropy, and with it comes the beast form power. Once per day, you can transform into a towering, razor-clawed werewolf, tearing through enemies with lethal swipes, moving at terrifying speed, your health and stamina swollen far beyond your mortal limits. Feed on the corpses of the fallen, and you extend your rampage, And if you own the Dawnguard expansion, feeding also feeds a whole werewolf perk tree, letting you grow into an even nastier beast. Better still, the beast blood is a constant companion, even in human shape. It grants you total immunity to disease, which in a land crawling with rock joint and ataxia and the coughing sickness of every bandit den is no small blessing. On paper, it's a spectacular gift. On paper. Here's what the game mumbles so quietly that nearly every first-timer misses it: the fine print buried in that basin of blood. The moment you become a werewolf, you can no longer benefit from a good night's sleep. That gentle, well-rested bonus, the free boost to how fast your skills climb that you get from sleeping in a bed you own, gone. Even the cozy lover's comfort bonus from sleeping beside a spouse, gone. Instead, every time you crawl into bed, the game gives you a mournful little notice. Your beast form keeps you from restful sleep. And this is where the mistake compounds with the very first sin of this whole journey, the scattered, slow-leveling Dragonborn. Because now, on top of spreading your perks thin, you've quietly switched off one of the game's easiest experience boosts. The wolf never truly rests. There's a reason for that, and it's a heartbreaking one, but we'll get there. The second piece of fine print is the one the bullet promised. Accepting the beast blood slams a door shut, because that same disease immunity that protects you from rock joint also protects you from the one disease that turns mortals into vampires. As a werewolf, you simply cannot catch it. You are locked out of vampirism entirely, immune to the bite, unable to walk the path of the vampire lord no matter how badly you might want to later. And if you're already a werewolf and somehow force your way into vampirism through the Dawnguard questline, the game will unceremoniously strip the beast form right out of your powers menu, because the two curses cannot coexist in one body. So that innocent gulp in the Underforge isn't just a gift, it's a choice, a fork in the road. And the first-time player almost never realizes they've chosen until 40 hours later when they meet a charming vampire lord and discover the door was closed the moment they said yes to Ayla. Now, for the tidbit that turns the whole gift bittersweet, the lore that explains why the wolf can't sleep. When a Nord dies a hero's death, their soul is meant to travel to Sovngarde, that golden hall of valor beyond the Veil. The same shining afterlife the World Eater Alduin haunts in the main quest, devouring the souls of the honored dead. It's the reward every Nord warrior dreams of. But a werewolf forfeits it. Lycanthropy is a gift from Hircine, the Daedric prince of the hunt, and Hircine collects. When a werewolf dies, their soul doesn't rise to Sovngarde. It's claimed by Hircine and bound forever to his hunting grounds, a wild, eternal forest where the soul hunts and is hunted for all time. For some, that's paradise. For old Kodlak Whitemane, the harbinger of the companions, it's a horror. His entire quiet, mournful arc is the story of a proud old wolf who wants nothing more than to be cured before he dies, so that his soul might finally reach Sovngarde and reunite with his ancestors, instead of running forever through Hircine's woods. That's why he sends you to hunt the Glenmoral witches for their severed heads, the grisly key to purging the beast blood, and why the emotional climax of the Companion's questline is not a battle, but a funeral, freeing Kodlak's trapped spirit at last. The restless sleep the game penalizes you with? That's a tiny mechanical echo of the same truth. The wolf cannot rest, in this life or the next. Here's a mercy the savvy player learns, though. Keep the spare witch heads. You only need one to cure yourself, but if you slaughter the whole Glenmoral coven and pocket every head, you can cure the beast blood, enjoy your restful sleep and your reopened options, and then, if you miss the clause, become a werewolf all over again, or with Dawnguard, ask Ayla to re-gift the curse. the blood is not a one-way street if you plan ahead. Most first-timers, of course, take exactly one head, cure themselves in a panic when they realize they can't get the well-rested bonus, and only later discover they've permanently barred their own path back to the wolf. Skyrim rewards the hoarder here, of all people. The one time keeping too many severed heads in your pockets turns out to be wisdom. And naturally, the community has been feuding about this since the day Dawnguard launched, in what is probably the single most argued build question in all of Skyrim: werewolf or vampire?
The wolf camp loves the raw, unsubtle power fantasy. Total disease immunity, a savage transformation with no downside beyond the sleep penalty, and a beast form that just gets more brutal the more you feed. The vampire camp counters with the vampire lord's terrifying toolkit: levitation, life-draining spells, raising the dead, and a stealthy Night Stalker path that turns you invisible in the dark, plus a far more interesting questline.
The endless middle ground argues that werewolves are better for early aggressive players who want to punch problems, while vampires reward patient, spell-slinging tacticians, and that the right answer depends entirely on whether you'd rather be a claw or a shadow. What everyone agrees on is that you generally can't have both at once, which is exactly why that quiet moment in the Underforge matters so much more than the first-time player realizes. So the lesson of the Beast Blood is not don't drink it. Plenty of Dragonborn run happily as wolves for 100 hours and never look back. The lesson is simply to know what you're drinking, that you're trading your well-rested mornings and your shot at vampirism, and, if the lore is to be believed, your very place in the Nordic heaven, all for a set of magnificent claws. Codlock knew the cost and spent his last years desperate to undo it. The least a first-time Dragonborn can do is take a breath before the basin and decide with open eyes whether the hunt is worth the eternity of running. And, of course, the mirror image of that whole werewolf dilemma is waiting on the other side of the road, wearing a far more elegant curse. Because if the beast blood locks you out of vampirism, then vampirism is the temptation the werewolf can never taste. But most first-timers never make it that far as a deliberate choice. Most of them become vampires entirely by accident, and then spend the next several in-game days wondering why the sun has personally declared war on them. It happens like this. Somewhere in a crypt or a ruined fort, the Dragonborn tangles with a nest of vampires, those pale, hollow-cheeked horrors who drain your life with an outstretched hand. Every time one of them lands that vampiric drain, there's a 10% chance it plants a seed in your blood, a disease with a lovely Latin-flavored name, Sanguinare vampiris.
And the first-time player, riding the adrenaline of victory, loots the bodies, shrugs off the little status effect blinking in the corner of their menu, and marches merrily onward, completely unaware they've just been handed a ticking clock. Here's the core mechanic. That clock is counting down. You have exactly 3 in-game days. For those 3 days, Sanguinary vampiris behaves like any other disease. A bit of rock joint, a touch of the sniffles, and it can be wiped away in an instant by drinking a potion of cure disease or kneeling at any shrine to the divines. 3 days. That's the whole window. Ignore it, and on the 3rd dawn, the seed blooms. The disease roots itself permanently into your soul, and you awaken as a true vampire. At which point, the humble cure potions stop working entirely, and your only road back to mortality becomes a genuine quest. The game even warns you, if you're paying attention. On the first sunrise after infection, a little message murmurs that you feel strangely weakened by the light. At that first sunset, another whispers that a strange thirst has come over you. These are the polite taps on the shoulder before the curse settles in for good, and the first-time player, busy sorting loot, sails right past every one of them.
Once you're a full vampire, you live under the 4-stage hunger system, and this is where the real torture the bullet promised begins. The longer you go without feeding on the blood of the living, the deeper your vampirism sinks, climbing from stage 1 to stage 4. And with each stage, the trade sharpens. You gain more power, better sneaking, stronger illusions, deeper frost resistance, but you pay for it in sunlight. Step outside between the hours of 5 in the morning and 7 at night, and your health, your magicka, and your stamina simply refuse to regenerate. Worse, their maximum values shrink. 15 points gone at stage 1, and the penalty growing crueler at every stage. Until at stage 4, the daylight isn't just an inconvenience. It's a slow, grinding agony that can bleed your health away second by second while you stand helpless in the open. The vampire who forgets to feed becomes a creature of the night not by choice, but by necessity, forced to skulk through the wilderness after dark, hugging the shadows, because the sun has become a weapon pointed permanently at their heart. And then there's the cruelest twist of stage 4, the one that turns a manageable curse into a full-blown crisis for the unprepared. In the base game, without the Dawnguard expansion, the moment you hit stage 4, every ordinary person in Skyrim can see what you are. Innkeepers, shopkeepers, guards, that friendly farmer who waved at you yesterday. At stage 4, they take one look at your sunken, blood-red eyes and attack you on sight. Which produces the single most darkly hilarious catch-22 in the whole game, because the person you need to reach to cure yourself is a wizard named Falion who lives in the swamp town of Morthal. And to get to him, a starving stage 4 vampire has to walk into a town full of people who now want to murder them. The cure requires a filled black soul gem and a ritual performed at a standing stone at dawn, and it's endlessly repeatable, so Falion will patiently unvampire you as many times as you manage to get infected. Getting to Falion alive, though, is the trick the game politely declines to help you with. Feed on a sleeping victim to drop back to stage 1 first, or you'll be fighting the entire town just to ask for directions. Now, the tidbit, and it's the darkest origin story in a game full of them. Vampirism in this world is not a mere sickness, it is a curse, and it has a maker. Molag Bal, the Daedric prince of domination, cruelty, and enslavement, one of the vilest entities in all of Tamriel's cosmology. The in-game texts tell the founding horror plainly, that the very first vampire was a woman named LeMay, an innocent who was seized and violated by Molag Bal himself, and from that unspeakable act, the bloodline of all vampires was born. Every pale hunter draining a victim in a Skyrim crypt is, in a sense, an echo of that original atrocity, a descendant of Molag Bal's cruelty, passed down through the ages in tainted blood. So when the first-time player carelessly shrugs off Sanguinare Vampiris, they're not ignoring a cold. They're brushing aside the slow, patient claim of a Daedric prince who deals exclusively in domination. And Molag Bal, as we'll see soon enough when we start shaking hands with his siblings, is not a lord known for letting go of what he owns. The community, naturally, has spent 13 years arguing about whether vampirism is even worth the hassle, and it's one of the more lopsided debates in the fandom. At least until you add expansions. The cure it immediately camp is blunt. Base game vampirism is, in their words, mostly a nuisance, a bundle of sun penalties and townsfolk aggression that makes simple tasks miserable for benefits you rarely notice. And the smart move is to drink a cure potion the instant you see that disease in your effects list and never think about it again. The Embrace the Night camp counters that. With Dawnguard installed, everything changes.
The Vampire Lord form arrives with its own perk tree, summoned gargoyles, levitation, and life-draining terror. And Stage 4 townsfolk no longer turn hostile automatically, transforming vampirism from a mediocre curse into a genuinely powerful and richly atmospheric build worth committing to.
The middle ground, as always, concedes both are right. Base game vampirism is a trap for the careless, and expansion vampirism is a feast for the committed. And the tragedy is that the first-time player usually experiences only the trap. So the lesson is simple, and it rhymes with the werewolves. Know what's in your blood. That little status effect blinking in the corner after a vampire fight is not background noise. It's a 3-day countdown to a curse made by a god of domination, one that will turn every sunrise into an enemy if you let it root. Check your active effects after every brush with the Pale Ones. Keep a cure potion in your pack the way a sensible traveler keeps a spare torch. And if you do decide to walk the vampire's road on purpose, walk it with open eyes and a full belly, because the sun does not care about your reasons. It only knows that somewhere in your veins runs the oldest curse in Tamriel, and it intends to make you feel every hour of it. Remember those little fortify enchanting potions I promised would come back to haunt us way back when our hero was thoughtlessly selling flowers to shopkeepers? Well, here they are, at the black beating heart of the single most game-shattering mistake a first-time player can make, which is, paradoxically, a mistake of omission. Because while the Dragonborn is busy fleeing dragons and gambling with curses, 3 quiet skills sit ignored at the bottom of their character sheet: smithing, enchanting, and alchemy. The crafting trades, the unglamorous ones. No fireballs, no dragon shouts, no monstrous transformations, just workbenches, forges, and mixing bowls. And the first-timer, hungry for spectacle, walks right past them, never suspecting that these 3 humble skills, woven together, form a loop so absurdly powerful it can trivialize the entire game more completely than any shout ever could. Let's start with the core facts, because most new players never even learn what these skills do properly. Smithing lets you forge your own weapons and armor, and crucially, improve existing gear at a grindstone or workbench, sharpening a sword or reinforcing a cuirass far beyond its base quality. And the perk tree, remember, climbs from steel up through elven and dwarven and orcish and ebony and glass to Daedric and finally dragon armor at the summit, the same one-way road we talked about all the way back in Section 1. Enchanting lets you bind magical effects into gear, but only if you first learn those effects by disenchanting an already enchanted item, feeding it into the arcane enchanter to strip out its secret and make it yours. Every enchantment you apply is powered by a soul, drained from a soul gem you filled by casting Soul Trap on a dying enemy. And with the extra effect perk near the top of the enchanting tree, you can bind 2 enchantments onto a single item instead of 1, which is where things start to get dangerous. Now, individually, these are useful. Together, they are catastrophic, in the best possible way. Here is the loop, the notorious spiral. The reason veteran players speak of alchemy and enchanting in hushed, slightly guilty tones. You brew a Fortify Enchanting potion. You drink it, and while it's coursing through you, you enchant a set of gear. A helmet, a pair of gloves, a ring, and an amulet with Fortify Alchemy. And because you were juiced on that potion, the alchemy boost on that gear comes out stronger than it should. Then you put on that gear, walk back to the alchemy bench, and brew a new batch of Fortify Enchanting potions, which now come out stronger because your alchemy is artificially inflated. Drink one of those improved potions, enchant a new set of Fortify Alchemy gear, which comes out stronger still, which lets you brew even better potions. And around it goes, each lap compounding on the last, the numbers climbing from tens of % into hundreds, into thousands.
Cap it off by brewing Fortify smithing potions and enchanting Fortify smithing gear. Then march to the grindstone and improve a weapon while wearing the full suit and chugging the potion. And you can sharpen a common dagger into something that deals so much damage, the game literally can't display the number properly. The first-time player who ignores crafting arrives at the endgame swinging a respectable steel sword. The player who embraced the loop arrives swinging a fork that one-shots dragons. There is no shout, no artifact, no Daedric bargain anywhere in Skyrim that comes close to this. Here's the tidbit, and it's a delightful one, because Bethesda tucked a secret helper for exactly this obsession at the highest point in the entire game. Climb the throat of the world, the tallest mountain in Skyrim, the 7,000 steps, past the gray dragon Parthenax perched at the peak, and keep going, right to the very tip, and you'll find a humble mining tool jammed into the snow, the notched pickaxe. It's a unique item that gives a 5-point boost to your smithing skill, and it is, quietly, a tribute. Back when Skyrim launched in 2011, Bethesda and the creator of Minecraft, a developer nicknamed Notch, had a friendly, tangled little history, including a genuine legal squabble over the word scrolls. So the developers hiked their Easter egg to the roof of the world and left a notched pickaxe, a wink to a fellow game about mining and building, resting at the summit where only the most determined climbers would ever find it. Fitting, really, that the tool for the ultimate crafting obsession sits at the literal peak of Skyrim, guarded by nothing but a very long, very cold set of stairs. There's an even more infamous cousin to the loop, too, one every veteran mentions in a whisper, the Fortify Restoration exploit. Through a genuine coding oversight, drinking a Fortify Restoration potion and then quickly unequipping and re-equipping your Fortify alchemy gear causes the boost to stack on itself, ratcheting your effective alchemy into the stratosphere in a matter of seconds, no patient looping required. The savvy know it. The purists refuse to touch it, because unlike the intended loop, this one is flatly a bug, a crack in the game's spine that lets you reach numbers so large they wrap around into nonsense. Whether you use it says a lot about what kind of player you are. Which is, of course, exactly what the community has been arguing about since the first person discovered they could make an invincible glass dagger of doom. One camp insists the crafting loop is the beating soul of Skyrim's freedom. This is a sandbox, they say, a game that hands you the tools and steps back. And if you want to spend an afternoon brewing your way to godhood, that's your reward for understanding the systems, no different from a chemist earning a breakthrough. The other camp mourns it, arguing that the loop is so powerful it quietly ruins the game for anyone who touches it, flattening every dragon and dungeon into a formality, draining all the tension out of a world that was supposed to be dangerous. They'll tell you they've watched friends discover the loop, spend one glorious evening one-shotting everything in the province, and then get so bored they stop playing entirely, because a game with no challenge is just a very pretty walking simulator. Even the hardest setting, legendary difficulty, crumbles before a fully looped character, which is why a whole subculture of players deliberately swears off crafting entirely, role-playing a Dragonborn who buys their gear like a normal person, just to keep the danger real. Both sides are right, which is the most Skyrim conclusion imaginable. But the lesson for the first-time Dragonborn isn't you must abuse the loop, any more than it was you must flee the dragon or you must drink the blood. The lesson is simply this: don't let these 3 skills rot at the bottom of your sheet out of ignorance, dismissing them as boring craft work while you chase flashier powers. Because tucked inside those workbenches is the most powerful build in the entire game, waiting patiently for anyone curious enough to connect the flowers to the forge to the enchanter.
You don't have to climb all the way to godhood, but you should at least know the ladder is there, that a handful of blue mountain flowers, a soul gem, and a grindstone can make you stronger than a mouthful of dragon souls ever will. The dragons are loud. The crafting is quiet. And in Skyrim, as our hero learns eventually, it's almost always the quiet things that break the world wide open. And speaking of Daedric bargains, because I did just promise that none of them matches the crafting loop for raw power, which is true, but it rather undersells how much fun and horror they pack into the trying. Because scattered across Skyrim are the shrines and whispers and talking dogs of the 16 Daedric princes, those amoral godlike beings from the realms of oblivion, and each one has a quest, and each quest ends with a gleaming artifact that any first-time player would kill for. Which is precisely the problem, because kill for is very often the literal price. The princes do not do favors, they do deals. And the fresh Dragonborn, dazzled by the promise of a legendary reward, tends to shake every outstretched claw without once asking what it's going to cost their soul, or more immediately, whose throat they're about to cut. Take the friendliest seeming one first, the deal that lures you in through a wagging tail. Wander near Falkreath and you'll meet a stray dog named Barbas, who, to the eternal delight of every first-time player, talks. He's had a falling out with his master and wants your help patching things up, and his master turns out to be Clavicus Vile, the prince of wishes, pacts, and bargains, lounging in a shrine deep in a cave. Vile sends you to fetch an old weapon called the Rueful Axe, and when you return, he purrs his offer. Kill Barbas, right here, with the axe, and you can keep it. And this is the moment the first-time player nearly ruins everything. Because the axe looks great, it's right there in your hands, and the game has trained you to grab shiny things. But here's the beautiful inversion the princes rarely offer. This is the one deal where betrayal is the wrong move. Spare the dog, refuse Vile's tempting little bargain, and you're rewarded with the mask of Clavicus Vile, the actual Daedric artifact, a helmet that makes merchants adore you and prices melt away. Far more valuable than that axe will ever be. Kill Barbas, and Clavicus Vile just mutters, with a shrug you can practically hear, that the poor mutt really should have picked a better friend. The tempting deal was the trap. The loyalty was the reward. Most princes never let you off that easy. Because here's the tidbit that makes the Barbas choice quietly devastating once you know it. Barbas isn't just Vile's pet. In the deeper lore, that scruffy talking hound is a piece of Clavicus Vile himself, his conscience, split off and given 4 legs and a bark. Vile is a prince of dangerous wishes, the sort who grants exactly what you asked for in the most ruinous way possible. And Barbas exists to temper him, to be the small voice of restraint against his master's cruelty. So when Vile offers to let you murder Barbas, he's inviting you to kill his own better nature. And when you refuse, you're not just sparing a dog, you're preserving the one thread of decency in a being who has none to spare. It's a quest about conscience, disguised as a fetch quest for a helmet, and nearly every first-timer plays it without ever realizing they were making a moral choice on a Daedric prince's behalf. Now contrast that mercy with Boethia, the prince of deceit, treachery, and betrayal, whose quest is exactly as pleasant as her portfolio suggests. Reach a decent level, and a book called Boethia's Proving starts appearing in the world, and following it leads you to a bleak shrine where a priestess explains what the Prince of Betrayal requires: a sacrifice. Not a goat, not a bandit, one of your own followers. A companion who trusts you, who follows you loyally into every dungeon, lured to the altar and murdered in cold blood on the pillar of sacrifice. This is where countless Lydias have met their end, coaxed to a lonely shrine by a Dragonborn who wanted a nice chest piece. And it doesn't stop there. After the sacrifice, Boethia pits you against a mob of her cultists in a bloody free-for-all, last one standing, and only then sends you to slay her current champion and strip the ebony mail from his corpse, a fine stealthy armor that muffles your steps and poisons those who come near.
A genuinely useful reward, purchased with the murder of someone who trusted you. That's the Boethia tax, and the game charges it without blinking. And she's hardly the worst of them.
Remember Molag Bal, the Prince of Domination who authored the Vampire's Curse a few nights back? He has a quest too, tucked in a haunted house in Markarth, and it asks you to take up his mace and beat a captive, defenseless priest, bludgeoning a helpless man at a god's command to earn the Mace of Molag Bal.
Or Mephala, the prince of secrets and murder, whose ebony blade is perhaps the darkest deal of all. The sword grows stronger and longer the more you kill with it, but only if your victims are people who considered you a friend, who trusted you, who called you ally. To fully awaken that blade, you must betray and slaughter the very people closest to you, one by one, each murder feeding the weapon a little more power. There is no crafting loop for that. There's only the slow corruption of turning your allies into fuel. The princes always deal fair, in their way. They just never mention that the currency is usually someone's trust, and often their life. The community, predictably, has spent well over a decade wrestling with the moral tangle of all this, and it's one of the richest debates in the fandom. One camp plays the Collector, hunting all 15 obtainable artifacts for the Oblivion Walker achievement, regardless of the cost, treating the murders and betrayals as pixels in a checklist, and shrugging that it's only a game. Another camp role-plays hard, insisting a good Dragonborn simply cannot do certain quests, that a hero of Sovngarde would never sacrifice a follower to Boethia, or eat human flesh for Namira's ring, or beat a priest to death for Molag Bal, and they'll leave those artifacts uncollected forever as a matter of principle.
And a third, more philosophical camp argues about the princes themselves. Are any of them trustworthy? Meridia and Azora present as almost benevolent, handing out their artifacts for comparatively clean deeds, while others revel openly in cruelty. But the lore-deep skeptics point out that even the nice Daedra are alien, self-interested beings who see mortals as tools, and that trusting any of them, benevolent seeming or not, is the real first-timer's mistake. There's no consensus, because the game deliberately refuses to give you one. So the lesson of the princes is the oldest one in this whole chronicle, dressed in Daedric finery. Read the fine print. When a talking dog or a whispering shrine or a book that appeared from nowhere offers you a legendary reward, stop and ask what it actually wants. Because sometimes, like with Barbas, the right move is to refuse the shiny thing and keep your decency. And other times, like with Boethia, the shiny thing is real, but it's soaked in the blood of someone who trusted you. The princes never lie about the reward. They simply let you discover the cost yourself, at the altar, with the knife already in your hand. And remember that treacherous little deal with Clavicus Vile, because a few sections from now, when we talk about the followers you'll lose, you may find yourself wishing you'd been kinder to a certain loyal housecarl than a certain prince ever asked you to be. Here's the bitter irony, though. After all that hand-wringing over whether to sacrifice a follower or spare a talking dog for a Daedric prize, the first-time Dragonborn is sitting on a stockpile of raw, honestly earned power they never bothered to spend at all. Because remember all those dragon souls pouring into you back when we talked about standing your ground instead of fleeing? That glowing golden counter ticking upward in your magic menu? For an appalling number of first-time players, that number just climbs and climbs.
souls piling up like unspent coins in a drawer, dozens of them, while the shouts they're meant to power sit locked and useless, and the word walls that would teach new ones gather dust in dungeons the player walked straight past. Let's lay out the core mechanic, because it's a two-step lock that trips up nearly everyone at first. A shout, a thum, the dragon language-made weapon, is built from up to 3 words of power, and you learn each word by finding a word wall, one of those curved, chanting slabs of ancient stone tucked into barrows and dragon lairs across the province. Approach a wall, and the letters glow. The whispering swells, and a single word of the dragon tongue burns itself into your mind. But, and this is the step first-timers miss, learning the word is only half the job. Knowing it doesn't let you use it.
To actually unlock a word for shouting, you have to feed it a dragon soul, spending one of those hoarded golden sparks from your menu. So the player who flees dragons has no souls to spend, and the player who hoards souls but never opens their shout menu to unlock the words has all that power sitting inert. Either way, they walk around Skyrim as a Dragonborn who can barely shout, which is a bit like owning a dragon and never letting it breathe fire. And then there's the cooldown, the mechanic that quietly ruins so many first-time shouting careers. After you use a shout, a blue ring drains around your compass at the top of the screen. That's your recovery time, and until it empties, you can't shout again. Here's the nuance almost nobody figures out unassisted. You don't have to use all 3 words every time. Tap the shout button and you release just the first word, a quick, weak version with a short cooldown. Hold it a beat longer and you get 2 words. Hold it all the way and you unleash the full 3-word blast, more powerful, longer lasting, but saddled with a much longer recovery. The clever shouter learns to match the shout to the moment, a quick 1-word unrelenting force to stagger a lunging bandit, saving the full 3-word version for when they really want to send someone sailing off a cliff. The first-timer, meanwhile, either mashes the full shout every time and then stands there defenseless during the long cooldown, or gives up on shouts entirely and forgets they exist. There are ways to soften the weight, too. The Amulet of Talos shaves 20% off your recovery, the Blessing of Talos from a shrine adds another 20 for 8 hours, and the effects stack, which is exactly why a devout shouting build treats the outlawed god Talos as a very practical friend. Now for the tidbit, and it's a delightful one that ties a knot around this whole chronicle. At the very top of the throat of the world, the same peak where the notched pickaxe waits in the snow, sits the ancient gray dragon Paarthurnax, master of the Greybeards, who will teach you something the game barely advertises: meditation. Ask him once the main quest permits, and he'll invite you to meditate on one of 3 words: Fus, Fame, or Yol, and doing so permanently deepens that word's power. Meditate on Fus, the word of force, and your unrelenting force gains the ability to occasionally disintegrate weaker foes into nothing, turning a shove into an execution. Only 1 meditation can be active at a time, but it stacks happily with your Stamming Stone, a free permanent upgrade most players never even learn is available. And here's the wonderfully absurd cherry on top. Paarthurnax, this solemn, ancient, philosophy-spouting dragon who teaches you the deepest secrets of the voice, is voiced by Charles Martinet, the very same actor who spent decades going, "It's-a me, Mario!" So the wisest dragon in all of Tamriel, and the world's most famous cheerful plumber, share a voice, which is the sort of fact that once you know it, you can never quite unhear. Which brings us, inevitably, to the single most agonized over moral debate in the entire Skyrim community, and it lands right here on this frozen peak with Paarthurnax. Because in the lore, Paarthurnax was not always a wise old teacher. Because in the lore, Paarthurnax was not always a wise old teacher. He was once Alduin's lieutenant, a dragon who helped enslave and terrorize mankind during the ancient Dragon War. Before he turned, betrayed his brothers, and taught mortals the Thu'um they would use to cast Alduin adrift in time. He has spent every millennium since atop this mountain in quiet penance, meditating on words of power, harming no one.
But the Blades, Delphine and Esbern, the dragon-hunting order you may have allied with, do not care about penance. They know his past, and they demand you execute him as the price of their continued help, refusing to lift another finger until his gray head lies in the snow. And so the player faces a wrenching choice: murder a repentant old teacher who has done nothing but good for centuries to satisfy a pair of zealots, or spare him, honor his redemption, and lose the Blades forever. The community has been at war over this since 2011, and it is not a gentle war. One camp spares him on principle, arguing that redemption must mean something, or it means nothing. Another kills him, arguing a dragon is a dragon, and the Blades have earned their vengeance. A third simply refuses to finish the quest, leaving Paarthurnax alive and the Blades in limbo forever, because they cannot bring themselves to choose. Kill him, and you keep your meditation bonus but can never change it, and the Greybeard Arngeir will no longer even tell you where the word walls are, a small, cold consequence for a large, cold deed. There's a quieter mechanical grumble threaded through all this too, a long-running complaint that shout cooldowns make most shouts frustratingly impractical compared to spells, which fire as fast as your magicka allows with no recovery at all. Fire breath hits harder than a fireball, the argument goes, but you can only use it once every 30 seconds, so a mage just out-damages you with spam. It's a fair critique, and it's why so many first-timers drift away from shouting entirely, not realizing that shouts were never meant to replace your sword or your spells, but to punctuate them, a devastating exclamation mark dropped into the middle of a fight. So, the lesson of the Wasted Souls is one of simple stewardship. You bled for those golden sparks. You stood your ground against dragons that terrified you and drank their souls out of the air. Don't let them rot in a menu. Open your shout list, spend them, unlock your words, and go hunting for the walls that teach new ones. Because a Dragonborn who never shouts is squandering the one power that makes them singular in all the world. And when you climb that final peak to learn the deepest words from the gray dragon at the top, take a long moment before you decide his fate. Because whatever the Blades demand, some choices, once shouted into the world, can never be unspoken. And here's a choice that was quite literally shouted into the world and can never be unspoken, because the whole bloody civil war tearing Skyrim in half began when one man used the voice you've been learning to kill a king. Ulfric Stormcloak, Jarl of Windhelm, once trained with the Greybeards himself, and he turned that sacred power into a murder weapon, challenging High King Torrik and shouting him apart in his own throne room. That single Thu'um lit the fuse on a war that now smolders across all 9 holds, and sooner or later, every first-time Dragonborn is asked to pick a side: Stormcloak or Imperial, Rebel or Legion. And the way most first-timers make this monumental choice? Vibes. Pure, uninformed vibes. The Stormcloaks wear cool blue and talk about freedom, so sure, them. Or the Imperials seem organized and official. I guess I'll be a good soldier. 2 sweeping political allegiances chosen with roughly the care one uses to pick a favorite color, while the actual stakes and the genuine ugliness on both sides sail completely overhead. Let's lay out the core conflict honestly, because the game deliberately refuses to hand you a clean hero. The Stormcloaks want Skyrim to secede from the Empire. Their grievance is real.
years ago, the Empire fought a devastating war against the Aldmeri Dominion, the High Elves of the Thalmor, and lost so badly it signed a humiliating treaty, the White Gold Concordat, one term of which banned the worship of Talos. And Talos matters enormously to the Nords, because Talos was once a man, a mortal hero who ascended to godhood, living proof that a Nord can become divine. To outlaw his worship, to send Thalmor agents hunting down the faithful, feels to Ulfric like the Empire kneeling to elven masters and spitting on everything Skyrim holds sacred. So the Stormcloak case is this. A crumbling empire has already surrendered its soul to the elves, and Skyrim should stand free, worship freely, and rule itself. It's a genuinely stirring pitch, and if you stopped there, you'd join Ulfric without a second thought. But the game doesn't let you stop there, if you're paying attention. Walk into Ulfric's own city of Windhelm and look around, and the rot shows. The Dark Elves, the Dunmer, are penned into a filthy slum called the Grey Quarter, treated with open contempt by the Nord locals. The Argonians, the lizard folk, aren't even allowed to live inside the city walls. They're decreed out to the docks, sleeping in a bunkhouse over cold water, working the shipments no Nord wants to touch. And when non-Nords are attacked out in the world, Ulfric's aid never comes. Only threatened Nords warrant his soldiers. So the freedom the Stormcloaks fight for turns out to be freedom for some, and Ulfric himself, for all his soaring rhetoric, rather conveniently stands to become High King of the very independent Skyrim he's fighting to create. Freedom fighter, or ambitious demagogue draping ethnic nationalism in the flag of liberty? The game hands you the evidence and lets you squirm. The Imperial side is no cleaner, just cleaner looking. General Tullius and the Legion argue for unity. The Empire, battered as it is, remains the only power on the continent capable of one day standing against the Thalmor, and a Skyrim that rips itself away only weakens the whole and hands the High Elves an easy meal. Stay in the Empire, they say. Endure the ugly compromise of the Talos ban for now, and preserve the strength that might someday break the Dominion for good. It's the pragmatist's case. Sacrifice a principle to keep the alliance that matters. But it comes wrapped in its own quiet shame, because the very first thing the Empire does in the game, at Helgen, is try to chop off your head without trial, and the Legion enforces a treaty that has its soldiers looking the other way while elves drag Nords off for praying to the wrong god. Order at the price of dignity. Neither banner is white. Now, here's the tidbit that reframes the entire war, buried in a document most first-time players never even find. Deep in the main questline, you infiltrate the Thalmor embassy, and if you dig through the private chambers, you'll find a stack of dossiers the elves keep on people of interest, and one of them is on Ulfric Stormcloak himself. It reveals that during the Great War, Ulfric was captured and interrogated by the Thalmor, by the very emissary who now runs the embassy, and that they filed him away as an asset. They fed him a lie, convinced him that information he'd broken under torture had doomed the Imperial city, planting a seed of shame and rage, and then let him escape to carry that fire back to Skyrim. And the chilling operational note at the bottom is the real gut punch. As long as the Civil War grinds on indecisively, the Thalmor intend to stay hands-off, because a Skyrim busy tearing itself apart is a Skyrim too weak to threaten them. The elves don't care whether Ulfric or the Empire wins. They win either way, as long as Nords keep killing Nords. Ulfric genuinely loathes the Thalmor. He is no willing traitor, but that may be the darkest irony of all. The proud rebel screaming for freedom from elven influence has been, without ever knowing it, one of the Thalmor's most useful instruments. The first-timer who picks a side on vibes never learns that the puppeteers were always someone else entirely, which is precisely why this is one of the most savagely contested debates in the entire fandom, a flame war that has raged since 2011 and shows no sign of cooling. The Stormcloak camp champions self-determination, cultural survival, and the right of a people to worship their god and rule their own land, dismissing the racism as the flaws of one leader rather than the cause. The Imperial camp counters that unity is survival, that secession is exactly the suicide the Thalmor are counting on, and that Ulfric's Windhelm shows what his free Skyrim would really look like. And a large, weary third faction throws up its hands and points out that the whole questline feels half-finished anyway, that Bethesda originally planned a sprawling, dynamic war with shifting front lines and cut most of it, leaving a thin sequence of near-identical fort sieges that resolve a civilization-defining conflict with all the drama of clearing a to-do list. They're not wrong about that part either. So the lesson of the Civil War is the same one that's threaded through this entire chronicle. Look before you leap, and read before you swear an oath. Whichever banner you raise it knowing what it costs, knowing that the noble rebel keeps elves in a ghetto, and the orderly empire lets your god's faithful be hauled off in chains, and that a pair of high elves in a distant embassy are quietly pleased no matter which throne you help topple. And remember, when the dragons force even bitter enemies to the negotiating table at High Hrothgar for a fragile truce, that the war you're fighting so passionately may not be the war that actually matters. Pick a side if you must, just don't pick it blind. And here, at last, is where I make good on that grim little promise from our dealings with Clavicus Vile, the one about wishing you'd been kinder to a loyal housecarl than any Daedric prince ever asked you to be. Because after all those Nords slaughtering Nords in the Civil War, there's one death that haunts first-time players more than any battlefield: the death of Lydia. Sweet, loyal, long-suffering Lydia, the Nord warrior handed to you the moment Jarl Balgruf of Whiterun names you Thane, sworn, in the words every player can recite from memory, to carry your burdens. And carry them she does, uncomplaining, through every barrow and bandit camp, right up until the moment her own Dragonborn accidentally sets her on fire, or plants an arrow in the back of her skull, or shouts her clean off a mountain. Lydia does not usually fall to the enemy. Lydia falls to you. And that is the 12th great mistake, and possibly the most quietly heartbreaking one in the whole game. The core of it is simple, and every player learns it eventually. Your followers are not invincible, and most of them can die permanently. Lydia is a genuine companion. She fights at your side, she hauls your loot, she can even be married with the right amulet. But she is not immortal, and when she goes down, she stays down. And there's no revive, no resurrection, no shrine that brings her back. Just an empty spot where a person used to be. And if you're unlucky, her corpse, still wearing the expensive armor you gave her, which the truly cold-hearted loot right back off her body. First-timers tend to discover all this in the worst possible way. Mid-fight, blasting fireballs at a swarm of Draugr, cheerfully unaware that Lydia has waded into melee range directly between them and the flaming death spewing from their hands. One, why won't she move? Too many? And the sworn shield sister is a smoking ruin on the floor. Now, here's the tidbit that turns the tragedy into something almost poetic, the piece of hidden mechanics that explains why it's nearly always your fault. Most followers in Skyrim, Lydia included, carry a hidden flag called Protected, and Protected is a beautiful, cruel little status. It means that no enemy in all of Skyrim can land the killing blow. A bandit chief, a frost troll, an ancient dragon. When they beat Lydia's health to 0, she doesn't die. she simply drops to one knee, wounded, and the enemy politely turns its attention elsewhere while she recovers and staggers back into the fight. She is, for all practical purposes, unkillable by the entire hostile population of the province. There is exactly one being in the whole world who can actually end her: you. The protected flag shields your follower from every sword and spell and claw in Skyrim except the ones coming from your own hands. So that stray arrow, that clumsy fireball, that gleeful Fus Roda that sends her sailing off a cliff into the ravine below, those are the only things that can truly kill her. She will throw herself in front of a dragon for you and survive. She cannot survive you. There is something almost unbearably sad in that. The person sworn to die for you is safe from everyone but the one she serves. It gets crueler still, because the protected flag only holds while she's actively following you. Dismiss her, send her trudging back home to Whiterun alone, and out on that long road, she reverts to fully mortal. No shield, no kneeling recovery, just a lone warrior walking through a land full of wolves and bandits and bears. Countless players have cheerfully waved Lydia off, only to receive, days later, a cold little letter of inheritance, informing them that their housecarl has died and left them a modest sum of gold. She made it through 100 dungeons at your side, and then perished on a quiet walk home because you couldn't be bothered to escort her. The savvy player learns to send followers off only from somewhere near their actual home, sparing them the deadly commute. The first-timer learns it from the inheritance letter, which is a genuinely melancholy way to find out. And there's a mercy worth knowing, a small roster of companions who genuinely cannot die at all, the truly essential ones. Remember Barbas, Clavicus Vile's talking dog? He's flagged essential, which means he simply cannot be killed by anything, ever, and makes a hilariously durable tank you can drag through any dungeon to soak up damage while he barks incessantly. Ayla the Huntress from the Companions is essential. So are a handful of others. Serana from Dawnguard, Mad Little Cicero, a few more scattered about. The wise Dragonborn, who's tired of accidentally cremating their allies, learns which followers are unkillable and leans on them precisely because there's no stray arrow tragedy waiting to happen. But Lydia, poor, devoted, protected, not essential Lydia, enjoys no such immortality. She is exactly durable enough to make you trust her and exactly fragile enough to make you mourn her. The community, naturally, has turned all this into one of the most beloved shared experiences in the entire fandom. Ask any longtime player about Lydia and watch a flicker of guilt cross their face, because everyone has a dead Lydia story. Everyone. The friendly fire, the cliff, the swinging blade trap she wandered into, the dungeon door she got stuck behind and left to the wolves. Her death is practically a rite of passage, memed and mourned in equal measure across 1,000 forum threads. And the collective grief is real enough that there's a whole cottage industry of mods devoted to making followers immortal, smarter, and less prone to standing in fire. Beyond the shared trauma, the debate splits along familiar lines. Which follower is actually the best? The immortal Serana, the loyal Mjol, the durable Barbas, and more fundamentally, whether to use followers at all. A large and vocal faction of stealth archers swears them off entirely, arguing that a companion is nothing but a clanking, alarm-triggering liability who blocks doorways, alerts every enemy in a dungeon, and steps directly into your line of fire at the worst possible moment. They travel alone, silent and deadly, precisely so there's no Lydia to accidentally murder. The other camp can't imagine the journey without a friend at their back, dead Lydias and all.
So, the lesson of the fallen housecarl is a tender one, unusual for a chronicle so full of murder and curses and Daedric bargains. Be careful with the people who love you. Mind where your fireballs land. Look before you shout near a ledge.
Escort your followers home before you dismiss them, and know which of them can survive your worst instincts and which cannot. Because Lydia asked for nothing but the honor of carrying your burdens, and she will follow you into any darkness in Skyrim and come out the other side, as long as the thing that finally gets her isn't you. Treat her a little better than a Daedric prince would, and she'll haul your loot to the ends of the world. Treat her carelessly, and one day you'll open a letter and find a handful of gold where a friend used to be. For all the loot Lydia dutifully hauls around before her untimely demise, there's one category of treasure the first-time Dragonborn almost never asks her to carry, because they don't even recognize it as treasure. Books. Dusty, unassuming, scattered by the hundreds across every shelf and table and skeleton's cold grip in Skyrim, and the average new player strides right past them, or worse, sells them by the armful to the nearest merchant for a couple of gold, never once cracking a spine. Which is a genuine tragedy, because tucked inside those neglected pages is not only the beating lore heart of the entire world, but also, for the mechanically minded, free permanent power just lying around waiting to be picked up. Skipping the books is the 13th mistake, and it's the one that quietly robs you of the whole reason this world feels so impossibly deep in the first place. Let's start with the purely practical, because it'll make even the most lore-averse player stop and pay attention. Among the hundreds of readable volumes in Skyrim, 90 of them are skill books, 5 for each of the 18 skills, and the first time you so much as open one, it permanently raises that skill by a full point, for free, forever. Open it and close it again. That's all it takes. No trainer's fee, no grinding, no limit on how many you can read at a given level. A player who systematically hunts these down walks away with 90 free skill increases scattered across their build, and a first-timer who sells them unread has quite literally thrown power in the bin. There's even a legendary one, the Ogma Infinium, a black, ancient tome you earn from a certain slithering Daedric prince we met at the very beginning of this chronicle, Hermaeus Mora himself, at the end of his quest for forbidden knowledge. And reading it grants a staggering 5-point boost to every skill along one of 3 paths you choose. So the very first section's respect-granting Prince of Forbidden Knowledge also hands out the single most powerful book in the game, which is fitting, really, for a god whose entire domain is what you can learn if you're willing to read the dangerous things. But the books are so much more than skill points, and here's where the world cracks open for anyone curious enough to look. Those volumes are where Skyrim actually keeps its history. The fall of ancient civilizations, the nature of the gods, the truth behind the Elder Scrolls, the origins of dragons, all of it written down in-universe by scholars and madmen and liars, so that the player who reads becomes not just a warrior, but a lore master, piecing together a 5,000-year story. And it's not only the leather-bound histories, it's the scrap of paper in a dead bandit's pocket explaining the falling out that got him killed. It's the journal on a mage's corpse, charting their slow descent into obsession. It's the letter that reveals a hidden treasure, or the note that recontextualizes an entire questline. Like, remember that dossier at the Thalmor embassy that revealed the whole civil war might be an elven puppet show? That was a note. A single page most players walk right past, carrying the biggest twist in the game.
Skyrim buries its best storytelling in exactly the places the impatient never look. The skeleton's hand, the dusty shelf, the overturned table in a forgotten cave.
Now for the tidbit, and it's the one every veteran grins about, because not all the buried lore is grand and solemn. Some of it is deeply, gloriously silly. Scattered throughout Skyrim, and indeed throughout the entire Elder Scrolls series, is a book called The Lusty Argonian Maid, a wonderfully bawdy little play about a lizard folk housemaid and her employer that is packed wall to wall with the least subtle innuendo imaginable. Polishing spears, scrubbing floors, and other chores rendered in prose so cheerfully suggestive, it's a wonder it passed the censors.
It's a running gag Bethesda has smuggled into game after game for decades, a wink to anyone paying attention, and finding a fresh copy tucked under some Jarl's bed is a small, reliable joy. The first-time player who never reads anything misses not just the tragedies and the mysteries, but the jokes. The sense that this world was built by people who wanted you to laugh as well as ponder, if only you'd stop and turn a page. And this is where the deepest, most beloved lore debate in the entire fandom lives. A mystery that exists almost entirely inside books, invisible to anyone who won't read them. The Dwemer. The dwarves, the game calls them, though they were neither short nor bearded, but a brilliant, arrogant race of deep elves who built vast underground cities of brass and steam. Machines that still whir and clank in their ruins millennia after their makers vanished.
And vanished is the word, because the Dwemer didn't decline, didn't die out slowly, didn't lose a war. They disappeared. All of them. In a single instant, across the whole world, an entire civilization simply ceased to be, leaving their automatons still marching through empty halls.
What happened? The game never tells you outright. It only leaves the books, accounts of their chief architect, Khagrenak, and his forbidden tools, and his experiments on the divine heart of a dead god buried beneath a mountain. And from those scattered, contradictory, unreliable texts, the community has spent decades constructing rival theories, each defended with the passion of scripture. One camp holds that the Dwemer were unmade, erased from reality, retroactively deleted, a whole people zeroed out of existence by an experiment gone catastrophically wrong. Another insists they ascended, that their arrogance was actually genius, and they transcended the mortal plane entirely, achieving a kind of godhood or slipping into a higher state of being that the very metaphysics of this universe quietly allow. A third believes they were folded into the great brass god machine they were building, becoming its living metal skin. Nobody knows. That's the point. It is the single greatest unsolved question in all of Elder Scrolls lore, and it is completely invisible to the player, who sells their books to a merchant and never wonders where all the dwarves went. So, the lesson of the skipped pages is perhaps the gentlest and most rewarding in this whole chronicle. You don't have to read everything. Nobody's asking you to sit down with all 300-odd volumes like it's a homework assignment. But at least look. Pick up the note on the corpse and find out how they died. Crack the journal and follow a stranger's slow unraveling. Grab the skill book off the shelf for the free point. And while you're there, read the one beside it about a vanished race of god builders, and let yourself wonder. Because Skyrim's greatest treasure was never the enchanted sword or the Daedric armor, it was always the words, the histories and the mysteries and the filthy little plays, waiting patiently in the dust for a Dragonborn curious enough to stop and turn a page, and discover that the world beneath the world runs far deeper than any dungeon. Now, For all the cosmic weight of vanished dwarves and puppet master elves, Skyrim also quietly offers the Dragonborn something far humbler, and for a startling number of first-timers, far more baffling. A home life, a spouse, a house, a steady trickle of coin. And the fresh adventurer, so competent at slaying Draugr, tends to be utterly hopeless at all three, stumbling through the romance, buying an echoing empty house they never furnish, and staying somehow broke through the entire game despite carting around a small nation's worth of loot. The 14th mistake is fumbling the domestic side entirely, and it's a shame because settling down in Skyrim isn't just cozy roleplay. It's one of the most quietly profitable things you can do. Let's start with love, because the mechanic trips up nearly everyone. Marriage in Skyrim runs entirely through a single item, the Amulet of Mara, symbol of the goddess of love, and you cannot simply buy it and start proposing. First, you must travel to the Temple of Mara in Riften and speak with the priest Maramal, sit through his little lecture on Skyrim's marriage traditions, and buy the amulet from him for a couple hundred gold. Only then, with the amulet worn openly around your neck, will eligible townsfolk start noticing you're available, and only townsfolk for whom you've already done some favor or quest. The first-timer, not knowing the Maramal step, wears an amulet they looted from a dungeon, wonders why nobody's flirting back, and concludes the game is broken. It isn't. You just skip the sermon. Do it right, and you'll get the option to propose, followed by a small ceremony at the temple and a ring called the Bond of Matrimony. And here's why it's worth the bother, mechanically. A spouse in Skyrim is a walking package of benefits most players never cash in. Sleep near them and you gain lover's comfort, that same 15% boost to how fast your skills climb that we met way back at the Loverstone, lasting 8 hours, and just as jealous since it won't stack with the Stones version. Once a day, your spouse cooks you a home-cooked meal that boosts your regeneration. And best of all, whoever you marry sets up a little shop and hands you a share of the profits, 100 gold a day, every day, accumulating indefinitely whether you visit or not, so you can wander off adventuring for a month and come home to a fat purse of collected earnings. Marry a merchant and you've got a permanent store to sell your loot to. The 200 gold amulet pays for itself in 2 days and turns a profit forever after. For a crafting-heavy Dragonborn, a stay-at-home spouse is basically a passive income engine with a wedding ring. And yet, the first-timer treats marriage as a novelty, gets hitched for the roleplay, and never once collects the gold sitting in their spouse's pocket. Here's the tidbit, and it braids together 2 threads of this whole chronicle in the darkest, most Skyrim way imaginable. Remember poor Lydia and the ease with which followers die? Well, if the person you intend to marry is also a follower, and they happen to die before the wedding ceremony, the game handles it with breathtaking bleakness. Their corpse turns up at the Temple of Mara on your wedding day. The priests, understandably rattled by the body slumped in the doorway, cancel the ceremony, and your grief-stricken would-be spouse storms off in a rage. You have to literally drag the dead body out of the temple, wait for everyone to calm down, and apologize before you can try again. There is no darker comedy in all of Skyrim than accidentally killing your bride with a stray fireball and then having to move her corpse so the wedding can proceed. And it gets grimmer still. In the base, unpatched game, if your spouse dies after you're married, you generally cannot remarry at all. The Dragonborn becomes a permanent widower, condemned to lonely bachelorhood for the rest of the game, because the developers simply never coded a path back to the altar. Death in Skyrim is remarkably good at being permanent, for housecarls and for love alike. Then there are the houses and the empty shell trap that snares every first-timer at least once. You save up your gold, you buy a home from the local hold, Breeze Home in Whiterun, say, and you walk proudly through the front door into a hollow, joyless box. Bare walls, no bed, no shelves, nowhere to put anything. Because Skyrim sells you the house and then charges you again separately for the furnishings, purchased room by room from the hold steward. The first-timer, not realizing this, assumes they bought a broken house and wanders off confused.
Furnish it properly, and it becomes a genuine haven, a place to store your endless loot in containers, to sleep for that rested bonus, to display your trophies. But mind which containers you use, because here's the hidden horror. While most storage in an owned home is safe and keeps your things forever, a notorious few containers in certain houses are not safe and will silently wipe out everything you stored the next time the area resets. Generations of Dragonborn have returned to their homes to find a lifetime's hoard of enchanted gear simply gone, deleted by an unsafe barrel, with no warning and no recovery. The wise stash their treasures only in known safe chests. The first-timer learns which barrels betray them the hard way. The community, naturally, argues about all of it. The best spouse debate is eternal. Combat purists marry unkillable warriors like Mial the Lioness or Alayla the Huntress to have an immortal fighter at their side, while economy-minded players marry stay-at-home merchants for the steady income, and role players marry whoever fits their character's heart. The best house debate rages just as hard, weighing the cheap convenience of Breeze Home against the sprawling luxury of Solitude's Proudspire Manor, or the buildable Hearthfire homesteads where you can raise adopted children. And underneath it all simmers the honest criticism that Skyrim's marriage system is desperately shallow. Wear this amulet and you're wed, with a trove of cut content still sitting in the game files. Recorded lines for spousal jealousy, for divorce, for your partner commenting on your crimes, all written and voiced, and then left on the cutting room floor. A whole richer relationship system that never made it in.
So, the lesson of the fumbled home life is a warm one to end this stretch on. You are not obligated to settle down. Plenty of Dragonborn roam Skyrim as eternal wanderers, and that's a fine life. But if you do it fully. Sit through Maramal's sermon, collect your spouse's gold, furnish your empty house, and learn which chests will keep your treasures safe. Because for all the dragons and Daedra and cosmic mysteries, Skyrim also quietly lets you build a small, ordinary happiness. A hearth, a partner, 100 coins a day, and a warm bed that makes you stronger every morning. Just try this once to make sure the person you marry is still breathing when they reach the altar. And so we arrive at the last mistake, which is really the mistake that contains all the others. The frantic first-timer's urge to sprint straight down the main quest, sword drawn, eyes fixed on the World Eater, treating the entire glorious sprawl of Skyrim as a hallway to the final boss. Because the main quest has a clear and thrilling shape. You're the Dragonborn. Alduin, the black dragon of the apocalypse, has returned to devour the world, and only you can stop him. It pulls hard. It waves urgency in your face at every turn, and the eager new player, conditioned by every other game they've ever played, puts their head down and rushes it, barreling from Helgen to the Greybeards to Sovngarde in a handful of hours, slaying Alduin, watching the credits that never come, and then sitting there in a suddenly quiet world, wondering if that was all of it? It wasn't. It was barely a sliver. Here's the core truth that reframes the whole game. The main quest is one of the shortest, and by wide agreement, one of the least interesting things you can do in Skyrim. Defeating Alduin takes maybe 15 or 20 hours if you dawdle, and the moment it's done, the warrior god soon sends you back from Sovngarde to a hero's welcome, and the world simply keeps turning, unbothered, waiting for you to notice everything you ran past.
Because sprawled all around that thin central thread is the actual game. The companions and their beast blood, the Thieves' Guild and its shadowy patron Nocturnal, the Dark Brotherhood and its murder of an emperor with a single poisoned root, the College of Winterhold and the Eye of Magnus, the 16 Daedric princes and their terrible bargains.
The Civil War and its buried Thalmor puppet strings. 3 whole expansions. The Vampire War of Dawnguard. The Ashen Island of Solstheim, where your rival Miraak waits. The homesteads and children of Hearthfire. Hundreds of side quests. Thousands of books. A province stuffed so full of stories that a player can pour 1,000 hours in and still stumble onto a cave they've never seen.
The person who rushes Alduin and quits has, in a very real sense, read only the title page of an enormous book. Now for the tidbit, and it's the perfect one to close on because it ties a bow around a thread we started way back when you stood at the Western Watchtower deciding whether to run. Remember the iron rule of dragons? That killing a dragon isn't enough? That only absorbing its soul makes the death permanent because a dragon whose soul survives can always be raised again? Hold that thought against the ending. When you finally defeat Alduin in Sovngarde, something conspicuous happens. Or rather, doesn't happen. You don't absorb his soul.
His body doesn't burst into that golden light and pour into you the way every other dragon's has. He simply dissipates, defeated but undevoured. And by the game's own stated law, that means Alduin may not truly be dead at all, merely scattered, beaten but not destroyed.
The Grey Dragon Parthenax says as much on the peak afterward, admitting he cannot be certain the World Eater can ever be completely destroyed, that Alduin is unique even among dragonkind, a child of the Time God himself. The other dragons wheel overhead, chanting in their ancient tongue that Alduin is fallen and the Dragonborn is now the mightiest. But fallen is not the same as gone.
So the ending you rushed toward isn't even really an ending. It's an ambiguity, deliberately left open, a whispered promise that the World Eater's shadow still lingers somewhere in the turning of the ages. You beat him. You never finished him. And that, somehow, is the most fitting non-conclusion this endless game could offer.
The community, fittingly, has debated for well over a decade whether the main quest is even worth prioritizing at all, and the consensus leans hard toward not really. Ask longtime players for their most unforgettable Skyrim memories, and you'll rarely hear about Alduin. You'll hear about the Dark Brotherhood's descent into betrayal, the Thieves' Guild clawing its way back from ruin, the quiet horror of a Daedric bargain, the first time they wandered into Blackreach and just stopped, breathless, at the glowing false sky.
The main quest, most agree, is the game's scaffolding, not its soul. A decent excuse to make you Dragonborn, quickly outshone by nearly everything around it. There's a sharper critique threaded through this too, the big plastic world complaint, that Skyrim barely reacts to anything you do, that you can end the world's greatest threat and the shopkeepers still won't restock, that even being the literal chosen one of the gods changes remarkably little about how the province treats you. And the countercamp shrugs and says that's precisely the point, that Skyrim was never a story to be completed, but a world to be lived in. And the freedom to ignore the apocalypse entirely and go open a bakery or read every book or marry a bard and adopt 2 children is the whole magnificent, plastic, beautiful gift of it. So the final lesson, the one that gathers up all 14 mistakes before it, is simply this: don't rush. The dragons will wait. Alduin has been coming for the world since the dawn of time. He can spare you an afternoon to explore a barrow, or read a filthy little play about an Argonian maid, or touch a standing stone you walked past on your very first morning out of Helgen.
Every mistake we've walked through tonight, the scattered perks, the fled dragons, the ignored crafting, the murdered housecarl,
the skipped books, every one of them is really the same mistake, wearing different clothes. The failure to slow down and actually be in this world, rather than racing through it.
Skyrim doesn't reward the sprinter. It rewards the wanderer, the reader, the one who stops to wonder where all the dwarves went. So take your time, Dragonborn. The World Eater isn't going anywhere. And neither, thank the divines, are you. And now, as our long chronicle of blunders and beast blood and buried lore draws gently to its close, let the province settle quiet around you. The dragons have folded their wings for the night. Lydia has finally set down her burdens by the fire, unharmed, and the forge in Whiterun has cooled to a soft orange glow. Somewhere far above, on the frozen roof of the world, an old gray dragon meditates alone on a single word of power, in no hurry at all, because he has all the time there ever was. You made mistakes today. Every Dragonborn does, and not one of them mattered in the end, because the beautiful secret of this whole vast frozen land is that it was always patient with you, always waiting, always ready to let you try again tomorrow. The snow is falling now in slow, weightless spirals over the tundra, softening every jagged peak, hushing every distant howl, tucking the 9 holds beneath a blanket of the deepest, gentlest white. The aurora drifts overhead in ribbons of green and violet, unhurried, asking nothing of you. There are no more choices to make tonight. No souls to absorb, no bargains to weigh, no walls to walk toward. Only the warmth of a fire that will not go out, and the soft certainty that the whole endless world will still be here, unchanged and waiting when you wake. So let your shoulders sink. Let the map go dark. Let the last ember of the day dim down to nothing. You are safe, and you are home, and the long, long journey can rest now. Close your eyes, brave one. The mountains will hold their silence, and Skyrim, ancient and forgiving, will keep watch over your dreams.